Hey guys, welcome. This is Seth from REtipster. In this video, I'm going to show you the process I go through when I'm researching a property and trying to come up with a final offer price. Now, depending on which method I'm using to find motivated sellers to make these offers to, the timing of when I'll go through this may vary a little bit. So for example, if I'm sending out some kind of a neutral letter or postcard, this is what I will do after a person responds to that postcard and before I send them an offer. However, if I'm sending like blind offers or like my 30-second email offer to somebody, just basically a shot in the dark, very, very vague idea of what I think the property's worth. In those instances, I'll be doing this after that person responds to the initial offer number I send them. And then these are the steps I'll be going through just to verify all the basic property information and make sure my initial offer to them was actually appropriate. Sometimes as I'll be going through this, I might discover reasons why, oh, that offer was actually way too high. It's not going to work because of this, this, and this. Or sometimes I might find out that my offer was too low, but they accepted it anyway, so we can just kind of go forward. But really, the idea behind this spreadsheet is it's just a really good way to streamline my research and not spend hours and hours and hours researching each property. I usually spend about 15 to 20 minutes tops per deal to come up with this final targeted offer. So as you can see, this is the spreadsheet right here. And the first thing that I will do is I'll head over to the data service that I use to do my property research, which is called DataTree. Now, DataTree is certainly not the only way you can do this. There's all kinds of services out there that do a pretty similar thing, but I've just found DataTree to be a pretty user-friendly platform that's pretty easy to figure out and find what I'm looking for, which I will show you here in this video. And I should also point out, we actually do have an affiliate relationship with DataTree. And if you go through our affiliate link, you can get special discounted pricing that you can't get if you just go through the regular DataTree website and sign up that way. So if you want to get access to that special pricing and help support REtipster.com in the process, you can get there by going to REtipster.com/DataTree. And I'll have a link to that beneath this video in case you want to check it out. Again, no pressure. There's plenty of other options out there too, but we've been pretty happy with DataTree, so that's what we're going to show you how to use here in this video. So let's go ahead and log in. All right, so this is the dashboard we'll see after we log in. And before I start researching anything, there's some just very basic essential information that I have to have before I can even take this first step. I have to have either the address of the property, or if it's a vacant lot and there is literally no address yet, I would have to have the assessor's parcel number or the APN. If I don't have that, because it's kind of an obscure number, not everybody has that on hand, I would have to know the owner name and then also the state and county that that property is in. It's also possible to search by the document number if you have that, but honestly, I've never even used that. In most cases, it's pretty reasonable to have at least one or two of these three things. So in this case, I'm gonna research a vacant lot and I have the parcel number and the state and county where this parcel is in. So I'm gonna go ahead and click on this. I'll go here and click on Florida because that's where this property is at. And then this is in Putnam County, Florida. Now I'll actually say more often than not when I'm starting this process, the information that I do have is the owner's name, not necessarily the parcel number. And usually it's pretty easy to find it that way. However, the parcel number is a more precise way of finding it because there's pretty much only one parcel in the entire county with that number. Whereas sometimes you'll find that an owner may own like a bunch of different properties within the same county. So just wanted to note that. But I'm gonna go ahead and plug in this parcel number here. And if DataTree recognizes that, it'll sort of auto-populate every single parcel number that shares that string of numbers. And in this case, there's only one because that's the one we're looking for. So I'll go ahead and click on this. And this is a property that's owned by my counterpart, Jaron Barnes. And the first thing that we're gonna see once we open up this property is a handful of things. We're gonna see the parcel map. So that's this thing right over here. If we open this up, we can see it a little better. We can also click on this thing to see more of the map and see that entirely and nothing else. And I'll also point out there's actually a number of really cool things you can do with this map. Something else you can do here is do this map overlay thing. And if you want, you can see the owner names of every single parcel in the area, which is kind of interesting. You can also see the parcel numbers instead if you'd rather see it that way. Another super interesting thing that will be probably of great interest to most land investors is that you can actually see a flood map as well. So if you go ahead and zoom out, you can see these lines right here are the flood zones. And not that it necessarily spells imminent doom for all the parcels that are within the flood zone, but still pretty helpful to know that. And it's really, really easy to see it just by toggling that switch on. The nice thing about this particular parcel is that it is not within a flood zone. If your property is in an area where the satellite imagery is available, it is possible to see the lay of the land from like a bird's eye 3D view right here. You can also do street view as well, kind of like Google Street View, if that data is available. And unfortunately for this particular property, it's not. It's kind of a bummer, but not the end of the world. So let's go ahead and close this out. So the other things we're going to see by default are the name of the owner, the property address, if it has a property address. Remember, this is vacant land, so we don't have that in this case. We'll also see the parcel number. If there was a house on this property, we'd see the number of bedrooms and bathrooms and the square footage of the living area. We can see the square footage of the lot itself, so that's fairly helpful. And we can also see the date at which this data was last updated. Now, when you want to start digging into this property and finding out all the information that DataTree can provide, you're going to want to go over here to this thing, Property Data and Reports. And usually what you're going to want to do is click this thing right here called the Property Detail Report. 9 times out of 10, especially with vacant land properties in particular, that's going to be more than enough information to answer all the questions you have. There's also something called the Total View Report, and that tells you a handful of things that the Property Detail Report won't tell you. Specifically, it's going to tell you if there's any outstanding loans or mortgages or liens on the property, which is certainly helpful. However, you also got to keep in mind with a lot of vacant lots, there are no mortgages on them because most banks won't lend on them in the first place. So usually that's not going to be an issue anyway. However, if you did want to click the Total View Report, it would give you that information. It also tells you a lot of other interesting stuff like market trends and comparables and prior listing history, which frankly I would find to be a lot more helpful for like a house where that data is a lot more relevant and accurate. But again, with land, a lot of times that information either doesn't exist, or even if it does exist, it's not really all that reliable in the first place. So usually the Property Detail Report is enough, but just keep in mind, if you do want to pay a little bit more and get the Total View Report, it's going to give you pretty much everything there is and then some. I'm just going to go ahead and stick with the Property Detail Report. I've actually already ordered it for this property, so I'm just going to go ahead and click on that and show you what it looks like. And this is pretty much it. We see again the name of the owner, we see the owner's mailing address, we can see the full legal description of the property, which is really helpful when we want to put that in our purchase agreement or our deed. You can see again the parcel number. Another super helpful thing, especially when it comes to vacant land, is the coordinates of the property. So what you can do is copy this number, put a comma behind it, and then copy this number, plug that into Google Earth, and it will take you precisely to this location on Google Earth if you want to research the property further from that platform, which can be very helpful in terms of seeing the terrain of the property, the elevation of the property, a lot of its surroundings, things like that. And just a funny piece of trivia here, the reason this is showing here in the Property Detail Report is because we at REtipster suggested that they add that. This didn't used to be here, but for the benefit of all the land investors out there, we know this is super helpful and this is something that ought to be in here, so you're welcome. Another helpful piece of information you'll see down here is the last transfer and conveyance date. So this was the date at which the property last changed hands. We can see the name of the seller, whoever that was, and then again the buyer name, which should match the name of the current owner. Also, if you ever want to help out with your title search, it is possible in most areas to actually order a copy of that deed if you want to see that. All you'd have to do is go ahead and click on this thing and it'll pull it right up, and then we can view this document right here, and there it is. Pretty cool, huh? So if we go back here and go down to last market sale, this also tells us the previous sale date and also the sale price back when it sold. So this can actually be pretty helpful for a number of reasons. So what this does is it tells us that back at this point in time in May of 2005, this person evidently thought the property was worth $22,500 because that's what they paid for it. Now we can see that when Jaron bought it, he paid $100 for it. So I'm not going to tell you that this right here will give you any conclusive answers on what today's present market value is on that property. However, it is a helpful reference point just to know that somebody at some point thought it was worth this much. And if Jaron is paying $100 for this thing, then it's probably reasonable to think that he's not going to get financially hurt from this transaction. There's pretty much nowhere the cards can fall but in his favor when he's paying this little for something that at one point sold for that much. So just helpful to know that. Sometimes you'll also find that like the prior sale price was, I don't know, $500 or $1,000, And yet when this seller is talking to you, they're saying, no, this property is worth $20,000 or $50,000 or something like that. And again, like, I'm not saying they're lying. However, you have a pretty solid piece of data here to work with that you wouldn't otherwise have if you weren't doing this kind of property research through DataTree. It's telling you what this person paid for the property back when they bought it. And that also might give you some clues as to how serious or legitimate their claims are about how much they're saying the property is worth. So just something to keep in mind. If we scroll down here, we can see the property characteristics. Again, this kind of thing is much more helpful when you're looking at something like a single family home or a property with improvements, because most, if not all of these blanks would be filled in. However, again, this is land, so pretty much none of this stuff applies. And then also down here, when it comes to site information, land use, you can see what this property is zoned as. Of course, that doesn't tell you specifically what you can do with the property. However, it gives you a pretty obvious reference point. It also tells you how many acres the property is. And then down here under tax information, you can see what the county's assessed value of the property is. And you can also see what the annual property tax bill is right there. So that's all obviously very, very helpful information. And I'll also point out, if you ever want to save this document for later reference, either for yourself or if you wanted to present this to a business partner, or even if you wanted to show this to one of your buyers in the future, this kind of report can be super helpful for a lot of obvious reasons, because this gives us a ton of information in a nice, neat little package. So if you want to save it, all you got to do is go over here to save. I'll go ahead and save this like that, and then it's going to open up a new window. And then here we have it. We can scroll down and see what that looks like. Looks like that map didn't really show up quite right, but oh well. Go ahead and download it like this, and it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. It's really easy to just copy and paste all this stuff over here. Now, something I'll point out here is that with a lot of rural vacant land properties, first of all, there won't be a street address. A lot of times it won't necessarily be in a city. And the zip code also might not show up here in DataTree. However, that doesn't mean there's no zip code. It just means you have to fish around for it a little bit. So all you'd have to do is take these coordinates here and plug them into Google Maps, just like I did right here, and go search for that. And it'll bring you to the property, and it should show you right over here what the zip code is. You can get that and plug it in there. And then also when it comes to the city, what I'll do is I'll just search around for the nearest obvious city and put that as the city. So in this case, looks like there's a city right here called Bostwick, or maybe that's considered a town or a village, something like that. But anyway, I would just take that name and put that down there as a city. And then when it comes to the street name, as we can see here, it looks like this one is at the corner of South Main Street and 4th Avenue. So I'm just going to pick South Main Street and say that that's the street. And there is no street number, so I'll just go ahead and refer to it as South Main Street. So after we've got this all filled in, there's a few line items that we're not able to answer based on the information that DataTree provides us. First of all, the utilities: water, electricity, gas, and phone. DataTree doesn't really tell us that. So the way we can figure that out is, first of all, by asking the current owner, see what they know. And if they can't answer the question, we can go ahead and figure out who the local utility companies are and give them a call. And sometimes you'll even be able to find like utility maps online, just showing where the utilities go and which properties have this kind of stuff available. In most cases, when you see a platted subdivision like this, it's usually a pretty safe bet that you're going to have electricity and all the basics, just because, you know, why would they go through the trouble of making this whole platted subdivision with roads and not putting utilities to them? It can happen, but usually it's a pretty good indicator when you're seeing these kinds of lots all clustered together like this. Something else DataTree cannot tell you is whether or not it would pass the perk test, which is a whole separate issue that I have a separate video on, so we can go ahead and check that out if you want to. When it talks about whether there's any buildings or junk on the property and or how the adjoining properties look, we can sort of answer this question just by looking at the parcel map. At the time when this image was taken, there was obviously nothing on the property itself and nothing on any of the adjoining properties. However, that does not necessarily tell us the current status of the property right now as we speak. And the only way to really know that definitively would be to hire somebody to drive by the property and take some pictures for you just to verify what's going on that property right now. I think 9 times out of 10 you're going to find that it looks pretty much the same in person that it looks like on this parcel map. But not always. I've had some surprises in my time, and chances are if you do this long enough, you'll encounter some of those too. So just know that while these parcel maps and Street View, if you have it, is certainly very, very helpful to have, it's not going to give you any guarantees that somebody hasn't showed up and dumped garbage all over this property since this satellite picture was taken. I won't say that's common, but it's within the realm of possibilities, so just be aware of that. And then lastly, DataTree also can't really tell you anything about whether there are any wetlands on this property. And then wetlands, surprise, surprise, I have a whole separate video about that. If you want to check that out, I'll be sure to link to that one as well. So just be aware that DataTree can't really answer that question for you. It's usually not an issue, but just want you to know DataTree can't do anything to help you answer that. But once we've got all that filled in, we would head over here to this valuation section. And if you know anything about land, you know that it is really, really hard to come up with any kind of a absolute guaranteed 100% value for vacant land. It's just a very difficult type of property to value. However, it is important that we have some vague idea what the property will sell for in real life and not just go by what the county says it's going to be worth or by what the seller is telling us it's worth, because usually neither one of those parties have any idea what they're talking about. Usually what I'll do here is first I will go ahead and grab the county's assessed value, not because I trust it, but simply because it's one reference point that's worth considering if you actually understand what that number means in the county where you're working. Because I'll tell you, this number means something different in pretty much every state throughout the country. In some states, the assessed value is 50% of what the county thinks is the full market value. In other states, that assessed value is 100% of what the county thinks that property is worth. Other times, it's like some other weird fraction. So I would never blindly follow this number, whatever it tells you. And even when you do understand what this number means in the state where you're working, even then, keep in mind that this number was formulated by somebody who works at the county, who is not a professional real estate appraiser. And the county does have an incentive to make this number higher, because the higher this number is, the more they can charge in taxes. So just understand there are a lot of inherent flaws in assessed value as a whole. And I wouldn't necessarily trust this as anything conclusive, but it is worth just taking note of. And then in order to find the ballpark market value, there's a number of different ways you could do this kind of thing. One option would be to order property detail reports on all the surrounding properties and figure out what those properties have sold for in the past few years. You could also go to a website like Zillow and search for properties that as closely as possible match the same size, type, and location as the one that you're looking at. And you can do that pretty easily just by using these different filtering criteria to specify the kind of property you're looking for and the size of property you're looking for, that kind of thing. I'm usually looking for both the for sale properties and the sold properties. And obviously the sold ones are more realistic comps in most cases because, you know, those are actual sale prices in the past few years, whereas the listing prices are not necessarily like hard, real data. People can list their properties for all kinds of crazy prices that they're never going to get. However, I think it does still tell you something. This tells you what kind of competition you're going to be up against when it comes time to sell your property. Are you going to be able to price your property well below all these other ones and have your property listing look better? Because if you won't have some kind of a clear competitive advantage here, it doesn't mean you won't be able to sell it. However, it could make your selling process harder. So just make sure that whatever offer you're making, you're going to be able to acquire that property at a big enough discount so that you can list it at a price that's very, very competitive with all the other listings in that market. So I'm seeing this property right here. It looks like this parcel is like in the exact same subdivision that we're looking at. So I'll add that one to the list. And it also looks like this one's pretty similar there, as is this one right here. So we'll just take these three and add them to the list of our comparable properties. And lastly here, if you have any overall comments or just concerns or issues or pros or cons you want to mention about the property, any things you want to remember in the future, like, hey, this property is landlocked, or this property has this problem, or this positive attribute. Pretty much any notes you can think of that you think are relevant that you want to remember, just go ahead and plop them right in there. And just based on these comparables I'm seeing, I would anticipate that a reasonable fair market value would probably be about $5,000 for this one right here. And then property taxes, I'm going to assume that I'm not paying any back due property taxes. However, if I was, I would put that number in here. For purchase closing costs, just as a general rule of thumb, if I'm closing a deal myself in-house, I'll usually put like $200 in here. If I'm closing with a title company, I'll put $500. If I'm closing with an attorney, I'll put $1,000. And I'm not saying those are always the numbers every time, but usually that's about how it pans out for vacant lots like this. So in this case, I'll just put $200 in there. Now, this next line item right here, the agent commission on the sale, this depends on, first of all, if you are using an agent to sell your property at all, and then also what type of property you're selling. If you're selling a vacant lot, like I usually am, in that case, most of the time you'll be expected to pay a 10% commission to the agent because of the fact that it's vacant land. If this was a house or more of a conventional type of real estate, then that number would be about 6%. So it depends on what type of property it is. And also keep in mind, if you're not using an agent at all, which that's usually the route I've gone, because I've found that usually I'm better at selling my own vacant land properties than most agents are. For whatever reason, a lot of real estate agents are kind of clueless when it comes to vacant land. It's probably just because it's a very, very different type of property than a normal house is. And most agents just don't understand how to market it very well. And a lot of times the commission isn't worth their while anyway, so they don't mess with land at all. So that's why I usually don't opt to use an agent. However, keep in mind there are some agents out there that actually specialize in land, meaning land is like literally all they do. And in those cases, I think they actually can bring a lot of value to the table and can very much be worth this kind of commission if you're able to find a really good one. Because a lot of times they'll have insider market knowledge that you won't have. They'll be able to sell on a lot more channels than you will. So I'm not telling you that you should rule out using agents, but just realize if you want to find a good one that's actually worth their salt, you're going to want to look for one that specializes in land, not just your normal run-of-the-mill realtor that sells houses only. This spreadsheet I'm showing you right here has 10% in there by default, but if you're using this to research a house, then keep in mind this number is going to be closer to 6%. And also, if you're not planning to use an agent at all, then you can just delete it like that and move on to the next item. And then also you want to account for any costs you're going to have to pay when it comes time to sell your property as well. So if you are using a title company, a lot of times you'll have to pay for half of that or whatever it is you negotiate with the person buying from you. Or if you're going to close it yourself on the sale, it's obviously going to be a lot cheaper. So in this case, I'll just put $200 in there again, just for the sake of this example. And then right here at the bottom, you're going to see this thing that says actual redeemable value. So what that means is that even if you sell this thing for $5,000, that's not going to be what you walk away with at the end of the day. After you pay for these costs, the most you're going to make on this property in just a straight out cash sale scenario is $4,100. That's like the best case scenario. So given that, down here, it's going to give you 3 different options for what kind of an offer you can make to this person. And I'm not telling you which one you need to do, or I'm not even telling you that any of these are appropriate, but these are usually what I go by. So this is telling me my minimum cash offer would be 10% of this actual redeemable value, which is $410. My medium cash offer would be $820, that's 20. And then the most I would offer for a property like this would be $1,230, and that's 30% of this actual redeemable value. And then also beneath that, it's going to tell you your maximum and medium and minimum net profit based on which offer you end up going with, assuming this all pans out according to plan, which it really does, but obviously we have to make some assumptions here when we're trying to make projections like this. And then down here at the bottom, it also tells us our maximum total investment costs and ROI, and then the medium, and then the minimum as well. So at this point, you might be asking, well, which one do I do? The minimum, medium, or maximum? And that's really a decision that I make based on any conversations I've had with that person, just trying to gauge how motivated is this person to sell? Are they totally apathetic? Do they not really care? Or like, do they need every last penny in order to accept my offer? And then also, more importantly, how much do I want this deal? Maybe I think it's going to be super easy to sell, so it's worth sticking my neck out a little bit more and offering 30%. Or maybe I think, man, this property's got a lot of problems. I don't know if I'll be able to sell this thing very quickly. In that case, then I would stick to the lower end. And I might even go lower than that, honestly. Say if the property is landlocked or if there's some huge issue with it, like wetlands or something like that. If I even make a final offer at all, it might be like 5% or like even lower than that, honestly. So it's totally up to you to determine what your final offer price should be. But this will at least give you a range of options to think about as you decide to go forward. So if you want to download this spreadsheet, I'm going to have a link beneath this video where you can literally just click it, download it and use it for yourself, and feel free to play around with it. I'm not saying you have to use this. I'm not saying this thing is perfect. It's just what I've used for years as just an easy sheet to go through and get all these answers in one place for each property that I'm going after. And also, if you are interested in DataTree, REtipster does have an affiliate relationship with them, and if you go through our link, you can actually get discounted access to it. So the prices will end up being significantly lower than if you just went to the regular website and signed up that way. So if you want to check that out through our affiliate link, it's retipster.com/DataTree, and that'll bring you right here. And I just want to make a couple quick notes on this. So if you decide to click on one of these things and sign up, you'll be taken to a page that looks like this. You'll fill out this information, and that's not going to automatically sign you up. That's going to cause somebody from DataTree to contact you and make sure that you're signing up for the plan that's right for you before you get started. And before you even have that conversation, I just want to explain to you quickly how this pricing system works. So as you can see, there are 3 options here. We've got bronze, silver, and gold. They go from cheapest to more expensive. And the way this works is it's sort of like a credit system. If you were to sign up for this bronze one right here, you would pay $47 a month, and that's a 12-month commitment. And then when you do decide to use this service, whether you're pulling a list or pulling one of these property detail reports that we just went through, or even one of the more expensive total view reports, all the prices for each one of these things are listed out here. And you'll notice that the more expensive plan you sign up for, the cheaper these things get each time you pull them. So it's one of those things where if you sign up for this cheapest plan but you end up using it a lot, you're going to end up paying a lot more in the long run. Whereas if you sign up for this one right here and you don't end up using it at all, obviously you're going to end up paying more in the long run that way too. So just because this number is lower over here doesn't necessarily mean you're going to end up paying less. It depends on how much you end up using the service on a monthly basis. Every time you order one of these things, it's going to work against the monthly credits that you've paid for here. So if you order one of these, it's just going to be subtracted from the monthly $47 worth of credits you've got on this plan. And as soon as you chew up all those credits, then it'll just start charging you beyond the $47 amount that you're paying just as part of your subscription. So hopefully that makes sense, but I just wanted to explain that really quickly before you even have this conversation and sign up. But I can't tell you, there are a number of other data services out there. Some of them are just as good as DataTree, some of them are not. But DataTree is the least expensive one I've seen for what you get. And also, it's one of the more user-friendly ones I've seen out there. So altogether, considering the other options out there, I think DataTree is a pretty solid option to work with. So I hope you found that helpful. I hope you find this spreadsheet helpful if you decide to use it, and I wish you all the best as you're pursuing your next real estate deal.